A man is struck by a bus on a busy street. As he lies dying, he calls out, "A priest. Somebody get me a priest." A man is struck by a bus on a busy street. As he lies dying, he calls out, "A priest. Somebody get me a priest." A police officer checks the crowd. No priest, no minister, no man of God of any kind. Then out of the crowd an elderly man comes over. "Officer," he says, "I'm not a priest. I'm not even a Catholic. But for 50 years I've lived behind St. Elizabeth's Church, and every night I've listened to the Catholic litany. Maybe I can be of some comfort to this man." The officer agrees, and the elderly man kneels down over the injured pedestrian and solemnly intones, B4. I-19, N38, G54, 072. The Jewish man gets hit by a car. One of the other pedestrians calls 911 and another rolls up his jacket and puts it under the man's head. He asks, "Are you comfortable?" The Jewish man replies, "I make a living." Two guys are in the water off a beach and get sucked out with the tide. The Jewish guy can't swim, so the other gets him in a lifeguard hold until they get close to the beach. The lifesaver guy says to the Jew, "Can you float alone?" The Jewish guy says, "Oi, is this the time to discuss business?" Scientists removed the left half of a man's brain and asked him to count to 10. He said, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Then they put it back, and removed the right half of his brain and asked him to count to 10. He said, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Finally they removed his entire brain and asked him to count to 10. He said, "Oh, I can count to 10. Believe me, people are saying I can count to 10 better than anyone in the history of our country. If you ask me to count to 10, I will count to 10 the likes of which no one has ever seen before." Edit, put it back. A man counted 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 and the doctor took note. The doctor paused. That's odd." The man replied, "I can't even. I uninstalled Facebook as I got depressed seeing my friends post their relationship and marriage. I uninstalled LinkedIn as I got depressed seeing my colleague post their job change and promotion. I uninstalled Instagram as I got depressed seeing my friends travel and enjoy their lives. But I'll never uninstall Reddit because you guys are more miserable than me. I'm so miserable, people now call me Les." An old man calls his son and says, "Listen, your mother and I are getting a divorce. 45 years of misery is enough. Long. Dad, what are you talking about?" The son screams. "We can't stand the sight of each other any longer," he says. "I'm sick of her face, and I'm sick of talking about this. So call your sister and tell her," and he hangs up. Now, the son is worried. He calls his sister. She says, "Like hell they're getting divorced." She calls their father immediately. "You're not getting divorced. Don't do another thing. The two of us are flying home tomorrow to talk about this. Until then, don't call a lawyer, don't file a paper. Do you hear me?" She hangs up the phone. The old man turns to his wife and says, "Okay, they're both coming for Christmas and paying their own airfares. I love this joke, see it on here every year. Still funny. Take my upvote. See it on here every year. Weak, fix that for you." A lawyer married a woman who had previously divorced 10 husbands. On their wedding night, she told her new husband, "Please be gentle, I'm still a virgin." "What?" said the puzzled groom. "Long. How can that be if you've been married 10 times? "Well, husband number 1 was a sales representative. He kept telling me how great it was going to be. Husband number 2 was in software services. He was never really sure how it was supposed to function, but he said he'd look into it and get back to me. Husband number 3 was from field services. He said everything checked out diagnostically but he just couldn't get the system up. Husband number 4 was in telemarketing. Even though he knew he had the order, he didn't know when he would be able to deliver. Husband number 5 was an engineer. He understood the basic process but wanted 3 years to research, implement, and design a new state-of-the-art method. Husband number 6 was from finance and administration. He thought he knew how, but he wasn't sure whether it was his job or not. Husband number 7 was in marketing. Although he had a nice product, he was never sure how to position it. Husband number 8 was a psychologist. All he ever did was talk about it. Husband number 9 was a gynecologist. All he did was look at it. Husband number 10 was a stamp collector. All he ever did was. God, I miss him. But now that I've married you, I'm really excited. Good, said the new husband, but why? You're a lawyer. This time I know I'm gonna get screwed. I'm here for the stealth joke on number 10, haha. Explain please? I still don't understand. Edit. Thanks guys. I'm one of the kids these days that haven't used stamps too much, so I didn't know they got licked. People lick stamps. Though ironically, usually not when you're collecting them. A 7-year-old and a 4-year-old are in their bedroom. You know what? I think it's time we started swearing, said the 7-year-old. When we go downstairs for breakfast, I'll swear first, then you. Sure, replied the 4-year-old. They make their way downstairs and their mom asks the 7-year-old what he wants for breakfast. I'll have Frosties, bitch. Whack, he flew out of his chair crying his eyes out. Mom looks at the 4-year-old and says sternly, and what do you want? I don't know, but it won't be fucking Frosties. Reminds me of this one. Little Johnny is playing with his electric train set in the living room and his mom is in the kitchen when she hears him say, the train has arrived at the station. All you motherfuckers getting off. Get off, and all you motherfuckers getting on, get on. She immediately scolds him for the language and puts him in timeout for 30 minutes. He comes back afterwards and resumes playing with the train. She smiles when she hears him say, the train has arrived at the station. Those getting off the train, please do so. Those getting on the train, please do so. Then he says, if you would like to make a complaint about the train being late, then go talk to the bitch in the kitchen. An Irishman, an Italian, and a redneck walk into a bar. Walks into a bar. The elderly Irishman slowly limped up to the bar and ordered an Irish whiskey. He sat down at the bar and saw Jesus sitting alone down at the end. He asked the bartender, is that Christ down there? The bartender said yes, so the Irishman sighed. Well, get him your finest Irish whiskey on me. Next, a hunchbacked Italian man came in and ambled his way to the bar where he ordered a Chianti. He saw Jesus and asked the bartender, is that the Lord down there? The bartender said yes, so the Italian man said, then send him a Chianti on me. A redneck sauntered in and sat down. He ordered a bush and saw Jesus. Holy shit, is that Jesus? The bartender said yes, so the redneck said, well, get him a nice cold beer on me. Jesus finished his drinks and walked over the Irishman. He touched the Irishman's legs and says, for your kindness you are healed. The Irishman hopped up and danced a jig out the door. Next he placed his hand on the Italian's back and said, for your kindness you're healed. The Italian's back straightened up and he stood tall for the first time in his life. He then walked out of the bar proudly. Jesus approached the redneck, but before he could touch him, the redneck held his hands up and said, don't touch me, I'm on disability. The prostitute put on her clothes and said, it was a business doing pleasure with you. A guy hires a blind prostitute. He pulled down his pants and asks her to give him a handjob. That's the biggest dick I've ever held. You're pulling my leg. A guy hired a blind prostitute. He pulled down his pants and put his dick in her hands. She, sorry, I don't smoke. It may not be 12 inches, but it smells like a foot. On his deathbed, an old Jew says to his wife, oh, Sarah, when the shop burned down you were right beside me. The wife nodded dutifully, I was, Moshe. He labored a bit and then said, when the Nazis drove us out of our beloved Deutschland you were beside me again. The wife tearfully said, I was, Moshe. And now you're at my deathbed, aren't you? Added Moshe. The wife replied, I am, darling. The old Jew sighed, I'm starting to think you're bad luck, Sarah. My favorite Jewish joke, NSFW. A priest and a rabbi were sitting next to each other on an airplane. After a while, the priest turned to the rabbi and asked, is it still a requirement of your faith that you not eat pork? The rabbi responded, yes, that is still one of our beliefs. The priest then asked, have you ever eaten pork? To which the rabbi replied, yes, on one occasion I did succumb to temptation and tasted a ham sandwich. The priest nodded in understanding and went on with his reading. A while later, the rabbi spoke up and asked the priest, is it still a requirement of your church that you remain celibate? The priest replied, yes, that is still very much a part of our faith. The rabbi then asked him, have you ever fallen to the temptations of the flesh? The priest replied, yes, Rabbi, on one occasion I was weak and broke my faith and made love to a woman. The rabbi nodded understandingly and remained silent, thinking about 5 minutes. Finally, the rabbi leaned over and said, beats a fucking ham sandwich, doesn't it? All the fraternities in my college rejected me because I was circumcised. Apparently you need to be a complete dick to get in. Moiled again.